Welcome into season 2 of Embrace Debate, a Carolina Panthers debate podcast here on the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, powered by the Fans First Sports Network. Desmond Johnson here, your moderator for this evening. It's two Panther content creators. You've probably seen them on Twitter or TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or wherever. We're going to rotate them out this year. So we have a rotating panel of some of your favorite Panther content creators. Tonight, it's Cody from the Carolina Cat Chronicles taking on Ricky from Panthers on Tap. What's going on, gentlemen? How are y'all doing on this evening?
Doing good, Desmond. Happy to be here with you as always, man. It's been too long since we've done an Embrace Debate. There's a lot to discuss in Panther Nation, man. There couldn't be a better time to do it. You and Ricky, I think this will be a fun night. I'm ready, man. Let's get it.
Ricky, what's happening, brother? How you doing, man?
I'm excited, man. Happy to be here. I can't imagine that Cody's going to be very opinionated tonight. He's a very quiet guy, so I look forward to this very docile debate tonight. No, I'm very happy. Thank you for having me. Cody's a good buddy of mine, and Des, I always enjoy getting to chop it up with you as well.
Absolutely, fan of both of your work. Again, if you're a Panther content creator and you're interested in actually participating in this, we're doing it on Thursday nights throughout the season. It's live at 7:30 or 7:30-ish, probably should say. So if you're interested in being on the panel, just shoot us a link to your pod and we'll check it out and maybe we'll pull you through. Guys, I'm going to get us right into the heart of everything. Just starting out with Panthers head coach Dave Canales. Really over the past 10 or 12 days, I feel like he's really put his stamp on this franchise in terms of decisions he's made and things he's done. And it's kind of turned the franchise around in terms of possibility and expectations. First question tonight, give head coach Dave Canales a grade after the first 4 games of this season. Cody, we'll let you go first.
Listen, man, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I'm going all the way. I'm giving Dave Canales an A+. And the reason why is because the balls that it took for Dave Canales to sit the number 1 overall pick, who you traded DJ Moore, a future first-round pick, which ended up being Caleb Williams. You traded up a lot to go and get Bryce Young. And let's be honest, Dave Canales was brought to Carolina on the auspice that he will be able to turn around Bryce and be the coach that can elevate him to the next level. And for him, after 2 games of the season, to say, you know what? No, I have a duty to every other man in this locker room to give them the best chance to win football games. He made an incredibly tough decision to bench Bryce Young, put in Andy Dalton, and that act alone has given this offense a sign of life that we haven't felt here in Carolina for more than 5 years now. It's been a wonderful sight to see the offense look alive. And I think Dave Canales deserves a ton of credit for that. Now you're seeing what his offense is really capable of, why he was hired. I believe that him and Brad Idzik and this incredible offensive line deserve a ton of credit for what the Panthers have been able to do. Yeah, that's a big A+ for me, man.
Ricky, what are your thoughts on Dave's first head coaching gig? What do you think about Dave's job so far at the quarter pole mark?
I'm giving him a C+. And I'll tell you the reason why, because Cody's right about making the tough decision. Although I don't know how tough it was. I don't think that Bryce Young made it all that tough on him through those 2 games. But I think that Dave Canales made it tougher on himself because I think he could have played him in the preseason. When you're coming off of a 2-15 season and you don't know what you have, you don't necessarily need to keep them healthy. You need to figure out if they're good first. A healthy, bad player doesn't help you out very much, right? I think that he missed the ball there, and that was the original thing. I think that some of the messaging that he gave in the offseason didn't really lead up to how swift he was getting rid of that decision or making that decision. It was the right decision, in my opinion. I'll preface it by saying that. And I do think that it took a little bit of gumption to say, hey, I can trust this veteran who also didn't play in the preseason because of injury, who also didn't get a lot of snaps with the first team. I can trust him to run the offense, right? So that's a smart move, but it's still one that a competent head coach would make. So I think sometimes when we give these like high grades early on, I think it's just kind of because we want to believe that they're doing such a good job. I think that team should have been more prepared for the first 2 weeks of the season. I thought on all 3 phases, they look unprepared. A lot of that definitely stemmed from Bryce Young's play. Bryce Young was very bad, man, in those 2 games. It was pretty remarkable, to be honest. And I still think that he could have done a better job with the team as a whole. I am really curious to see how he develops these young receivers, because that's his forte, almost more so than the quarterback stuff that follows him around. So I think that it's going to be a really interesting year. I love his energy. As long as he stays genuine, man, and makes the tough decisions, I'm good with it. But C+ so far for me.
Desmond, after you, I have a rebuttal. But go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I would also put into context what that preseason meant, right? There was a bunch of injuries on the team that really didn't allow them to play Bryce Young like they wanted to. There was no Robert Hunt. There was no Damian Lewis. And I think that they didn't want to put Bryce in a situation to fail before the season even started. Look, Ricky, you pinpointed something that I've been a real big stickler on for a long time, and that's the amount of preparedness that the team gains from preseason football. I purposely think it's a little bit overblown. I think if you played Bryce Young in every preseason game, it wouldn't have changed the flaws that saw him benched after week 2. And I think that Dave Canales did a good job managing the team in that time period while also preserving the health of the roster that had been pretty banged up to that point. So I love the debate, man, because there's a really big debate around how much preseason football helps you prepare your football team. And Roger Goodell thinks in a few years, there won't even be preseason football. So it's certainly interesting, but no, I respect your opinion, Ricky.
No, I kind of agree with Cody on the preseason thing, because there's no preseason football on any other level but the NFL. They don't do it in high school. They don't do it in college, and it doesn't really seem to matter in terms of who can play and who can't. I've had a theory about the Bryce Young thing since he got benched. I think I put it out online. So if you're like, I don't know, it seems kind of diabolical, but this is kind of what I'm thinking just from seeing everything that happened. We'll never know for sure, but I feel like Dave knew that Bryce wasn't ready early. Like he knew for a long time that Bryce Young had regressed and was not going to be able to run the offense he wants to run, which is basically deep throws downfield, run the football, control the clock. Bryce couldn't really do that. So they didn't play him in preseason to protect him. And then when they did play him, recognized that they played him in that Buffalo game in week 3, but it was only after Buffalo announced their starters were not going to play. So he was playing against their second string for just one series, had a touchdown, looked good, get him out of there before you can see any warts or whatnot. I think that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan went to David Tepper before the season began, somewhere in the preseason, and told him straight up, we don't think Bryce is ready. We want to start Andy Dalton. Let's let Bryce sit behind him. Since David Tepper and Nicole Tepper, that's kind of their pick, they were kind of like, well, let's see him in live action first before we make that decision. And they kind of decided after a week or two, if it was just not working, then they would have the blessing to do it. That actually goes down. The team morale is down. And really without any kind of negativity or pull from the front office, Canales is able to swap out the two quarterbacks with no interaction whatsoever from David Tepper or any words from him whatsoever. That tells me he was already in the know. Like he already knew that Bryce was broken and that him playing during the season was not going to fix it. And they already knew Andy Dalton would be able to do this, but they just had to get him. They had to get Bryce after to show that he couldn't do this before they just started Andy. Because remember, they tried this last year, same week too, week 3. All of a sudden, Bryce had a mysterious foot injury. Andy Dalton comes in and starts, plays well, loses the game, and Bryce starts the next week. And a lot had to do with the coaching changes and everything else. But same kind of thing, I think, except this time Andy won week 3, and they're leaving him in there, and he's going to be the quarterback going forward. But that's my theory that Tepper, Canales, Morgan, they already had an idea of what they were going to do at the quarterback position. It was up to Bryce to flame out or actually show, and he flamed out. So they had Andy sitting there, and it changed the whole mentality of the football team offensively and defensively just by putting one guy in. It just says a lot about the quarterback position and football in general. But that's my theory. I think that's what happened. I think that's why the only reason why that Bryce got to play in those first 2 games.
I think it's possible. I can't speak to any of it, right? So like,
yeah, I mean, I can't prove any of it.
Right. And so it's difficult. It's difficult to really like combat a hypothetical, right? Because you may be 100% correct, you may be 0% correct.
Right.
What I would point to with what Cody said, because I appreciate his rebuttal on that too about the preseason, about how the health context and all that. But Bryce Young had his healthy offensive line in week 1 and week 2 in the regular season.
Yeah.
And what he didn't have in the preseason was a first string or even second string defense coming after him, regardless who was in front of him. He never had that threat. And people like to talk about the joint practices. Watch all the highlights of the joint practice against the Jets. He's standing up in a non-contact jersey.
Yeah.
He's not, there's not that fear. There's not that sped up internal clock. And I think that that's really his mental obstacle right now, is that he's got a lot of internal processing that he needs to figure out before he can get to the on-field stuff.
That's actually a great segue to the next question tonight, which is about Bryce Young. With Bryce pretty much on the bench, it looks like for the remainder of the year, barring injury to Andy Dalton, what should the Panthers do, in your opinion, with Bryce Young long term going forward? Have you seen enough? Is he fixable? Like, what do you think here in terms of what they should do with Bryce? What should be the plan, Cody?
So listen, I think right now there is no way justifiably that you can look any other guy on this roster in the eyes and say Bryce Young gives us the best chance to win football games. And another thing that I slightly disagree with Ricky on is I feel like there's some mental things to Bryce not being prepared right now, but I also think there are some physical things that have come to light. Him always throwing off of his tippy toes to me is a problem. He never has a firm base to be able to throw the football, which sort of causes him to sail some of those footballs that he throws. And I also think that the height was something that, personally, I was never too afraid of that when Bryce was drafted, because there have been other shorter quarterbacks that have been very successful before. But the fact that they never played him under center, like, for example, the New Orleans Saints did with Drew Brees, I felt like he had a lot of problems really seeing the field and trusting his arm to be able to affect every level of the football field. And some of those things, I don't necessarily know if they're fixable for Bryce. However, if they are, in my opinion, he has to look at what Andy Dalton is doing, how he's running the offense, how he's trusting his protection, how he's changing the protection, and how to best be able to attack the defense. I just don't feel like there's any scenario in which Bryce will be able to do that for the Panthers this year. I would not look to trade him. There's no value for him in my mind right now. You traded up so much to get him. Grabbing another 4th or 5th round pick, that's just taking a giant L for the world to see. So I would keep him on the roster as long as possible, let him learn and grow, and maybe next year, if he advances upon some of those draws and clawbacks that I just mentioned, he might be able to take that next step, and maybe it looks like a Brock Purdy or a Tua Tagovailoa.
Ricky, your thoughts? What do you think the Panthers should do with Bryce Young?
Well, I hate to say this without having any kind of like substantial backup for it, but when you bench him after 2 weeks like that, and he looked like he had regressed as significantly as he had, he's going to have to be damn near flawless if he were to come back on the field and gain any support from A, the fan base, and B, the teammates in that locker room. I know that they're supportive of Bryce Young. They've come out and they've said some of the right things. They've also come out and said a lot of read between the lines type of deals, in my opinion, where they've said things like, hey, when you got a veteran quarterback back there playing under center, you could kind of be yourself. You could play freely. You could do the things that you know what you're supposed to do. You're not worried about having to help that other guy. That's a pretty crucial thing to say, in my opinion. And it's not meant to be derogatory necessarily, but it's telling. And I think that when you're in that kind of situation and the coach feels this is his first year head coaching, right? He's been an offensive coordinator 1 year in his career. This is his first time having the pulse of a football team and having to keep that entire dynamic happy, content, and thriving. I think that this was a move he had to make. I don't see any way outside of an injury from Andy Dalton that Bryce Young plays again this season. And I know there is a lot of conversation about what if they're 1-8 or they're 2-7, 3-7, whatever come the bye week. Don't you put him back out there because you got nothing else to play for?
No.
For what though?
Yeah, no.
Who benefits from it, right? Because if Bryce Young, if the only way to try to quote unquote fix him, which I don't think is the case, I unfortunately think that his time here is over as far as a starting quarterback. But how does he benefit from that? If he needs to sit to learn and to reset, you got to let him sit. You don't rush him back in to find out, did he sit long enough? It's like when you're cooking something in the oven, you don't open it every 15, 20 minutes to find out if it's done. You're supposed to keep that oven closed and cook it all the way through. Let him sit, let him do those things. And then out of sight, out of mind, maybe you could get some sort of value for him in the offseason with the team that maybe gets a new coaching staff in and says, we don't want to take one of these, what's the guy's name from USC, the rookie quarterbacks, and say we could take him in the 3rd or 4th round, or we could get Bryce Young for that 4th round pick and the Panthers unload it and get an extra pick in the draft next year.
So here's my thing, because me and Skylar Callahan, we were really high on CJ Stroud for most of the evaluation period. We kind of got convinced to go on Bryce Young when it became apparent he was going to be the number one pick. But I don't know if I was ever 100% there. And a lot of it was not so much his size, because Kyler Murray and others, they're that size, but their differential is that they're fast, like they're quick. Like Kyler Murray is actually he has a pocket presence. He actually scents people around his feet and will actually run away from them and create a play. Bryce can't do that. Bryce is too slow to do that. So it makes it where his height becomes a disadvantage. And to Cody's point, I was noticing this year especially, he was having to jump to throw screen passes because defenders were running in like this. And like he literally has to jump throw to get it over top of them. And that's just for like a behind the line of scrimmage screenplay type thing. Ball's getting batted down. He's leaving the pocket after literally like 1-2 seconds. And then boom, he's spinning out of the pocket. And a lot of that's probably PTSD from last year. But then to see that the Panthers have a top 5 graded offensive line so far from PFF. And it's like, Bryce, what's going on, man? I do agree with Ricky that I do not think we see Bryce for the rest of this year. I don't want to see Bryce for the rest of this year. I think I had enough in the first 2 games. Right. Like those first 2 games felt like a chore to watch, just because they were just so hard. Yeah, so they made everything so hard. And then when Dalton comes in, everything just looks easy, like the way football's supposed to be. And it was funny too. The first couple of weeks of this season, it feels like wherever the Panthers play, either if they're playing late or if they're playing early, the next game or the game before it is always the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're always literally watching like, what is this kind of football? And then you go immediately to, oh, this is like next level football. This is the way it's supposed to look. And like it's contrasting like to what I was watching with the Panthers the past 2 weeks. I feel like Andy and company on the offense have made it look like a relative good offense, and that's reflected to Dave Canales. So really, it's not just Bryce getting graded. Dave Canales had to worry about himself getting graded too. Like his offense was looking like crap with him running it. So he has to protect himself. I don't think Bryce plays another down here again unless Andy gets injured, and you can't trade him right now because his value is so low. You're basically going to have to give him away, and you gave away so much to go up to get him. That's not going to work. So I don't know what you're going to get back in return. It ain't going to be close to what you gave up to get him by far, but I just keep him on the roster right now. You're not hurting anything. He's not costing a whole bunch to keep him.
That's the reason why I don't want to trade him. You're taking such a substantial loss compared to what you traded to get up and go get him. Plus, let's be real. We have no obligation to do what's best for Bryce Young. We're under obligations to do what's the best for the Carolina Panthers, and having him go and rejuvenate his career somewhere else for next to nothing. Sorry, I'm just not interested. I'd rather him be a competitor and try and work his way back up to the top here in Carolina. I mean, look at Jordan Love. He sat for 3 years, and now, he's given that Green Bay offense a lot of reason to be hopeful for the future. I would keep him on this roster for as long as possible. And if he has anything left to give, let him earn it. Let him go out there and compete for it. I also agree that we're probably not going to see him, because I really do doubt that he'll be able to fix some of those mechanical flaws that we were just talking about within the process of a few weeks' time.
Main problem with all that, especially Jordan Love's like 6'4". Like you can't add height to Bryce. I think that's his main problem, to be honest. Like he just can't throw the ball down the field the way Canales wants him to. And before people jump on me and they go, "Oh, he was doing it at Alabama all the time," and yada yada yada. Yes, he was, but he's lost the ability to do that now. With you just said, his footwork, he's throwing everything off his tippy toes. Things are sailing now because of that. His accuracy is all over the place. If he throws it down the field longer than 10 or 15 yards, there's no guarantee it's going to hit the wide receiver. And that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of why I had to take him out. But I don't know if that's fixable here. Like that might be something where a change of scenery is the only thing. Because look at it from Bryce's perspective too. You were the number one pick of this franchise, and they've already benched you after 18 games. Do you want to play for the Carolina Panthers anymore? So that's up there too.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would push back on is the toesiness is a real thing. Like he does play off of his toes, but like you just insinuated, he did do that as well at Alabama. Like that is the way that he has always played that position, and it is because of his height, right? He had more confidence, man. He played in more rhythm. He also had a better supporting cast at Alabama than what he came here for, and more alignment with coaches of what they want him to do. As far as the athleticism or not being fast enough in the NFL, I'll say, though, that last season, even as a rookie, he didn't do what we're talking about right now with the bailing out of a clean pocket. He didn't have a clean pocket all that often, but he didn't bail out of it when he did have a clean pocket. That is why I think it's mental obstacles more so than physical deficiencies. I still think that he's never going to have the world's strongest arm. He's never going to be able to make those huge drive throws that we see Josh Allen's and Pat Mahomes and those guys make. That's never going to be a part of his repertoire. But he also played with a much better accuracy throwing the football in his rookie year. And I'm not saying that was consistently there, but it existed. We're not seeing it at all through those first 2 games. And he just spent the offseason with a quarterback guru, quote unquote. So that's why it's alarming that he didn't progress at all and, in fact, regress. But the physical things, man, I think that is just a matter of consistency and trying to hone in on some of those things. But no matter how much he takes to those coaching points in practice, if he can't put it on the field on Sundays, man, it just doesn't matter.
And especially when your performance is affecting other people's jobs. You know what I mean? Like you got people need to be on tape, and the ones that are like, we should put them in so we can just tank and get a better pick. Football players are not wired that way. I wish, like, just from being on with Jonathan Stewart, like, because I was kind of that way for a while too, and he was like, no, this is a 53-man roster, man. There's people that like are on this roster, they can't tank. Like, the average NFL career is like 3 years. Like, they can't afford to look bad on tape and then end up getting pushed off this team and can't find work someplace else. They're not thinking about one draft pick to come in here and turn everything around. They're thinking about, how do I look on tape? Am I going to be here next year? Do I need to go someplace else? Do I look good enough to go someplace else, even though we're playing badly here? He's like, NFL players don't think about tanking. It's not something that comes into their vocabulary. It's just not something they do. Like, you're out there putting your body on the line, and you're asking us to lose this game on purpose. So some kid out of college can come in here and save whatever us grown men have been trying to do for 18 games. That's just not how it works. So anytime you talk about tanking, then this is not, no one on panels talk about it, but I see it all the time online that we should tank, put Bryce back in there, and because we already know he sucks and we're going to lose a bunch of games, get the number 1 pick. That's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. Let me move real quick because we're gonna hit the wall here in just a bit. We got about 7-8 more minutes. Chuba Hubbard has been a bright spot the past 2 weeks in the offense. He's rushed for over 100 yards both weeks as we've gone 1-1. Would you consider Chuba Hubbard a top 10 running back in the league right now?
Right.
Man, that's a tough one. Top 10 in the league.
Yeah,
probably not.
How many running backs can you name before you land on Chuba?
Yeah, I could probably do more than 10. I could probably do more than 10. But the thing with Chuba is this is a guy that had injury through his first 2 years. He said he spoke about it, that he had a significant core injury, which really limited his contact balance and his ability to get after it after contact, right? Looking at him now, because that was a criticism that even our own fan base had a lot for Chuba Hubbard, was that he just kind of fell to the ground a lot after that first touch. And now he's fighting through it. He still isn't great at evading that last defender. He still kind of seems like he seeks it out almost like if there's a defender 3 or 4 yards ahead of him, he's more willing to run through you than he is to run around you. And I think that's the difference between a very good quality running back and a dynamic running back 1. I think that Chuba Hubbard works terrific as a committee back. I think that he's a complementary player. I think that he has a absolute valuable skill set of his one cut downhill. He has worked harder than anybody on the team as far as his pass catching. You hear the stories of him on that jugs machine after every single practice for 30 plus minutes. And it showed. He's got 13 catches on 14 targets this season. I think last year he had 1 drop. Before that, it was a drop a game almost, it seemed like, for Chuba Hubbard. So the guy puts in a lot of work. He's the definition of outplaying expectations. He's great for the locker room. Is he a top 10 running back in the NFL? Probably not.
Cody?
Listen, man, you can call me a Chuba Hubbard hipster because I was a fan of Chuba before it was cool. Okay, I remember like 2 or 3 years ago when everybody was making fun of him dropping passes and not being the running back that he was coming out of, I believe it was Oklahoma State, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He was leading rusher in college football, if I'm not mistaken, his senior year.
Yeah, listen, and everybody joked about Matt Rule's wife being the one that wanted him, so he was Matt Rule's wife draft pick. Listen, I've always maintained that when you give Chuba Hubbard a good offensive line, he can run hard and is a dedicated, powerful runner, and you want him going at a rate of speed downhill. I agree with Ricky. He has done much better in developing a post-contact balance and being able to stay upright more like Alvin Kamara does now. And he's growing in the pass catching department. Now they trust him with those short dump off passes. It's been a great check down for the Carolina Panthers. And listen, I remember that game. It was like a year or two ago when Steve Wilkes was the head coach, and the Detroit Lions came into town, and Chuba and Deontay Foreman had a day between the both of them. Another thing I like to consider is that Chuba Hubbard has gotten consistently better every single year. And now he's on his third coaching staff in a row. Yep. Like, the man has been one of the most consistent Carolina Panther players on the entire roster for a number of years now. I'm a fan of him. I'm normally not a fan of breaking the bank over running back, especially when they're so plentiful in the draft and even as undrafted players. But I would not mind breaking off some I love you money for Chuba, reward him for his dedication to the Panthers. I don't know if he's top 10, but to me, it really doesn't matter. I think he's an incredible asset to this offense, and I would love to have him here in the future.
Charlotte Sports One, who's watching with a lot of folks tonight, makes a good point. Great back, don't get me wrong, but if they thought Chuba was still the number one guy, they wouldn't have drafted Brooks. They would have waited, and that's a good point. And we haven't seen Jonathan Brooks yet behind this offensive line. Again, this offensive line is rated top 5 in the NFL. I know it sounds crazy because we're used to it not being good, and now all of a sudden it's become very good. But it should make sense because that's where they spent their money. They literally spent their money on the interior of this line and getting it right. There's a first rounder on the end in Icky that we've been that's been maligned for like the past year or two. That's turning around because they're actually doing stuff that he got drafted for. They're running the football like he's a run blocker, So they're doing certain things and they've been healthy so far. All of them have played all these games. Real quick bonus question before we get out of here tonight. Shout out to everybody that's watching us on whatever platform you may be watching on, whether it's YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's all over right now. But I wanted to go macro view of the entire league real quick. There's a lot of interesting storylines going on right now across the league. Give me your biggest surprise so far across the league.
Go ahead, Rick.
Man, it's hard not to say Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders.
That's a good one.
I mean, look, Jaden Daniels, it's not just that he's playing well. We talked about it all last year that CJ Stroud was having this historical rookie season, right? And that he was doing things we had never seen any other rookie do and how special that was. Jaden Daniels was like, hey, hold my beer. Like, watch me play rookie quarterback in the NFL. It is remarkable what he's doing. The Commanders, they brought in their new head coach, and I thought that their composition of that coaching staff with Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator, thought that was a really interesting thing. I didn't know how that was going to work in his return to the NFL. There was just a lot of question marks. That offensive line wasn't playing well, right? They weren't supposed to be good. All of a sudden, man, I mean, that offense is clicking. He's throwing like 80% in these last 2 games, completion percentage. And he's not just taking little dump offs. He's chucking the ball downfield. I think Jaden Daniels is a terrific story. I love watching it. And I do love the little bit of poetic justice of Bears fans kind of panicking a little bit. Did they take the wrong quarterback for the year after we did?
Cody.
So yeah, there's a few good ones. I think a runner-up is Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. But to me, mine's a little more of a disappointing one. Those of you might know I'm a real big Clemson fan. And dude, seeing the regression of Trevor Lawrence in real time is kind of depressing, man. Like, I thought that he would continue to grow and thrive, and it really looks like it looks like Doug Peterson's time is running up there in Jacksonville. But
they just paid Trevor Lawrence, didn't they? Didn't they just
they did, and I understand why you do. That's the nature of what you're doing in today's NFL. If you believe you have a top tier talent, but it really does seem as though he's regressed from last year to the year before, and I just don't know what to make of it, man. The Jaguars can't seem to get out of their own way. I know they have a lot of other problems, but yeah, seeing Trevor miss a bunch of wide open players that I've seen him hit a million times before, it's just sort of wild to me, man. I don't really know what to make of it.
That's a good one too. It's crazy when you think about there was a stretch at Clemson where Trevor Lawrence was backing up Deshaun Watson as they were winning national championships, and now look at where they are professionally. Both of those quarterbacks, it's just wild. They're both worth over $560 million, but guaranteed. But I've heard the thing with Trevor Lawrence. The thing that's always made me laugh that people say about him is that he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Like whenever you do like the list of the best quarterbacks, when you get to like the top 12 or 14, he's always 11 or 12 or whatever it is. Like, he's never 5 or 6 or higher than that. For me, it's probably Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. 4-0. no one was thinking about the Vikings, especially after the McCarthy kid got hurt that they drafted from Michigan. I think everyone just kind of thought those things kind of put it along or whatever. But their defense is one of the best in the league. Sam Darnold is leading the league in touchdown passes. I think Justin Jefferson might be the MVP of the league so far because he's making Sam Darnold look like a legend right now. So I'd probably go with Minnesota, but there's a couple other ones out there. But I'd probably go with that. But that's going to be it right now. Like I told you, it's a quick, tight 30 minutes that we do this on. Again, if you are a Panther content creator, if you do a podcast or a radio show or whatever you may be doing, and you're interested in entering into the Thunderdome and doing the debate with us, just hit us on Instagram or hit us on Twitter. We'll try to set it up for you. We're going to try this every Thursday live at 7:30. Shout out to everybody that came in to check out the show. And we'll be back next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. We'll put out on social media what the lineup will be. But for Cody, for Ricky, this is Des. You've been watching Embrace Debate here on the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, powered by Fans First Sports Network. Peace.
Keep pounding.